Groom got the shock of his life on his wedding day. Bride was devastated. Most would agree that a wedding day is one of the happiest and most glorious times in a man's life. A man from South Africa had the same feeling at the beginning of his wedding day, but it actually ended a lot differently, and not in a good way. The man was about to marry the woman of his dreams, and their loved ones were all there to witness their union. But as the ceremony was about to start, the groom and the bride, as well as the people in the church, were startled to see an unexpected guest. Suddenly, there was a commotion and screams could be heard. The events that followed surely made their wedding day unforgettable, but sadly, for all the negative reasons. Luan and Amale from South Africa were both excited for the day of their wedding. They've been in a relationship for years and were extremely sure of each other. They were both excited, happy, and at the same time, anxious. Everyone who knew the lovely couple had the same thoughts. They were a match made in heaven. Amale was such a beautiful woman, and Luan had to compete with a few rivals to win her attention. In the end, he emerged victoriously. There was no way he was going to let go of his chance. After years of courtship and of proving to Amale that he was worthy of her, Luan decided that it's time to take their relationship to another level. He was keen to show to her and to her family that he was serious. With the help of some of his friends, he organized a small party where he invited Amale's family and closest friends. Of course, the highlight of the party was when he got down on his knees and asked his girlfriend if she would marry him. Knowing Luan for so long, Amale had no second thoughts. She said yes right away. Everyone around them cheered with delight. It was such a pleasure to witness a couple who's so in love with each other. Since that day, the romantic plans were set in motion. Luan and Amale were both working as full-time employees in different companies. However, they used their designated leaves to prepare the necessary things for their wedding, from the legal documents to the church, venue, wedding gowns, suits, foods, and more. There were too much on their plate. Amale was extremely happy because Luan was such a patient man. In South Africa, the bride-to-be is usually the one who arranges almost everything. The groom is mostly needed for financial purposes. However, Luan held himself responsible for their wedding plans. Amale thought she was one lucky woman. With too little time to spare, Luan and Amale soon found themselves struggling with their schedules. They began to miss appointments, and Amale had to rely on her friends for help. She wanted her wedding day to be perfect. Although she felt the weight of preparations on her shoulders, she couldn't blame her fiancé. He was busy working for their future. Fortunately, one of the couple's friends recommended a wedding coordinator who helped them a lot. The church was personally chosen by Amale as well as her wedding dress. But for the rest of the preparations, that included hiring a videographer, caterer, florist, and more, the couple depended heavily on the wedding coordinator. Time went by like bliss until their most awaited day came. Amale was already a darling on her own even without makeup. She got an infectious smile and her eyes looked as if they were telling romantic things. On her wedding day, her family and friends were stunned by how beautiful she looked. Perhaps it was true that a woman is most beautiful on her wedding day. She wore a simple yet elegant white gown. Amale had even restricted her eating regimen in the past months to ensure that she would look her best. She wanted to show Luan that she was such a sweetheart to behold. With the help of his closest friend, Luan settled for a black and white tuxedo. He was beaming with excitement as he was putting on his formal garments. Finally, Amale will be officially his. It was their day, and in his mind, nothing could go wrong. Confident and handsome, Luan accepted the congratulatory messages from his workmates and friends. He was about to marry one of the most beautiful women in their village. He felt like he was on top of the world. Luan and Amale decided that their union will be witnessed only by their closest relatives and friends. They chose the small chapel where they attended Mass together. However, when they arrived, they've seen that there were plenty of guests waiting to see them. Although some of the guests in the church weren't originally invited, they decided not to do anything about it as they knew them anyway. They were also from their little community. They were both excited and feeling anxious, and they couldn't care any less. When the bride and groom arrived in the church, the groomsmen and the bridesmaids were already there. The wedding coordinator told them to go to their respective places as the ceremony was about to start. Having rehearsed multiple times prior to the wedding day, it didn't take long for everyone to get organized. With their favorite music playing in the background, the procession began. There was a stunned silence as the groom and bride walked side by side to the main altar. They were the last to enter the church, and everyone was amused by how good they looked together. In their eyes, everyone can see that was indeed in love. When the lovely couple was already in the front, it was time for guests to take their seat. But as they were about to do so, they were surprised to see another guest hurriedly walking down the aisle. The admirable couple only held the attention of the guests for a short time. The newcomer evidently captured their full attention and interest. For a while, some of the guests thought that the woman was only late for the procession. Without hesitation, the woman stormed inside and looked like she was ready for battle. What made everything more confusing was that the woman was already wearing a wedding dress, almost the same as Amale. Were their eyes betraying them? The solemn mood inside the church was quickly ruined by the newcomer. Judging by the reactions of the guests, no one knew who the uninvited woman was. She came from nowhere and was evidently intending to bring harm than good. With no resistance from the crowd of onlookers, she went straight to the couple and shouted at the groom. When Luan looked at her, he looked like he had seen a ghost. Of all days, it was the least time Luan wanted to see his unexpected guest. At first, he felt as if he was hallucinating. The woman in front of him was also wearing a bridal gown, but Amale was by his side, holding his arm all along. The woman also wore a veil that somehow hid her face. However, Luan recognized her. It was impossible for him not to. He had been with the woman for so many times in the past. He closed his eyes and wished that it was not for real. But when the woman began to speak, Luan realized he was doomed. At first, Amale couldn't understand the sudden change of atmosphere inside the church. It was her wedding day, and she spent a lot of time making sure everything would go perfectly. They were only waiting for the officiant to start the ceremony. Although she was quite confused, Amale was not dumb. The realization had hit her. She was on the verge of crying a little earlier, but that was because of joy. When the woman began to say why she was there at her wedding, tears came running down her beautiful face. The unexpected guest was no other than Anika, the woman Luan dated in the past. No one, not even his closest friend, knew of his infidelity. He made it clear to this woman that she was just his mistress. There was no love between them. Clearly, Anika was not the type of woman who will be scorned. And just like that, prior to his marriage proposal to Amale, he broke off the relationship between them. Luan thought it was enough. He had no idea how much he'd hurt the poor woman. Anika was on top of her fury. She didn't care if it was a solemn ceremony. Moreover, she didn't fear for her safety. Anika knew that all the people present were on the side of the bride and groom. Any time she could be dragged out of the church, but she didn't care. Yes, she was a mistress, yet at the back of her mind, Amale didn't deserve a guy like Luan. The bride deserved better. Luan made a wrong move of deserting her. She had invested too much in their relationship, and he decided to marry another woman. It was all beyond she could take. Anika was shouting at the top of her lungs. She was mad with rage. Luan realized he can't settle the issue quietly. When Anika became violent, Luan lost his control. He dragged the woman on the side and was commanding her to leave. Hearing what the woman was saying, Amale couldn't help but cry. It seemed that Luan really knew her and that they had shared something intimate in the past. Although her husband-to-be called her crazy, she knew that whatever she was saying was true. She felt it. Seeing Amale alone on the altar, Luan's best friend and best man decided to interfere. He told Luan to talk to Amale while he's dealing with the crazy guest. There were lots of shouting, and the guests were watching in a mixture of shock and curiosity. Surprisingly, the woman seemed to have incredible strength. She was losing her cool, and she looked like she was out of her mind. with all that wedding gown and veil. However, she was determined to tell everyone about Luan's infidelity. It was her last card. When it turned out that making the gatecrasher leave wouldn't be that easy, some guests began to murmur their disgust. The best man had to use force, and suddenly screaming can be heard. Oddly enough, an amused guest took out his phone and decided to capture the hilarious situation. Anika kept on ranting about how she was ditched by the guy who acted as if he's the nicest one on earth. Luan looked like he was bathing in his own sweat. The moment was unforgettable. When the best man failed to get the uninvited guest out of the church, Luan and Anika went on and shouted at each other, face to face. For a while, Amale felt as she did not exist at all. Luan had clearly lost control. Seeing the helpless and desperate bride, a bridesmaid in pink finally stopped watching and approached the woman. It was quite amusing how she had managed to convince Anika to leave. Well, hail to girl power. These days, it's hard to keep a thing secret, especially if it looks hilarious and interesting. In hopes of sharing a lesson to all the men and women out there, the guest, who had the chance of recording the unexpected drama, uploaded the clip on his Twitter account. He completed the post with the caption, "Side chick rocked up at the wedding also wearing a wedding dress, groom trying to calm the situation." Within minutes, reactions went flooding his Twitter account. The video was uploaded by a Twitter user that goes by the name of Koki. He made the post public. Needless to say, the gatecrasher received a fair share of admiration from the viewers. It was a crazy thing, ruining what's supposed to be a perfect wedding day. But she had something to fight for, and in the end, Anika was cheered on. Every man commented about what they felt after watching the hilarious clip. One user wrote, "I hope every man that cheats gets a side chick like this." Of course, beneath the somehow funny/amusing moment, there was a ruined wedding. Hundreds of viewers shared their sympathy towards the bride. She had clearly no idea that her groom was doing something under her nose. And for Luan, you bet Twitter users had slashed out their disgust and outrage at the groom. Others said that he deserved the shame. Sadly, it's not only he who received the punishment for his sin. Poor Amale would definitely remember her wedding day. Although it was an unfortunate event for all the involved parties, people just can't help but spread the message behind the video. It was one of the karma you would get once you've decided to cheat on your partner. The clip had been shared and was watched for over 675,000 times. There was no way the groom could get back his dignity. One woman even wrote, "I wonder what lies he tried to feed his fiancée afterward." Despite the commotion, Luan and Amale's wedding took place in that little church in South Africa. Their families and friends decided to laugh it off and encourage the couple to move on. The confrontation can be done afterward anyway. Perhaps it was a way of forgetting the shame they received on that fateful day. But we can only wonder, was Amale still sure of what she was feeling for this groom? Well, only time can tell.